Welcome everybody to the Week 5 NFL Thursday Night Showdown video. I am your host, Christian Hardy, at By Hardy. I'm not really much of a host. We really go back and forth. And I'm here with Adi, at Really Adi, on Twitter. And we are from LocksDFS.com. This is brought to you by LocksDFS.com, the only sponsor of these videos. I just think of DGAF and his
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
So we're sponsored by LocksDFS.com. That's where we sell our season passes, where we sell our passes to our content, our lock sheets, player grades, analysis. You have these showdown breakdowns here on the video format, but we'll also do a written format of those, as well as the lock sheets for every single showdown, every single island game showdown, and that's going to go throughout the playoffs. And we dropped, as I might have said it on the podcast last week, but we dropped it to $99 for the rest of the season. Of course, like I said, includes the postseason, and we also have our NBA season pass at $99. That's going to include preseason, postseason, lock sheets, analysis, grades on those sheets as well. And me and Adi are planning on going live Monday through Friday for those as well, for at least 30 minutes, about an hour before lock. So get in on that. If you have any questions about the NBA season pass or anything like that, if you're interested in playing NBA DFS, do you have anything to say about it, Adi?
I'm not doing hockey this year to double down on NBA.
Yeah.
So for what that's worth, like, we're going hard with NBA. It's a steal of a price at $99. It's cheaper than anything else out there. We're really trying to form a community with it. We're trying to get a lot of people into our Slack chat and get a lot of conversation going, because that's what we feel like is really important in a content site, is having a strong community. So we're trying to build that. So we lowered our prices, just kept it at $99, flat, easy. And I really wanted to provide hockey this year, do content for that. But, we really want to just get as much effort put into our NBA product as possible. So we're both going to be, tag team in this, and it will be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for these. And there's so much stuff in the offseason that's gonna play out so interestingly when we get into the game. So check us out, locksdfs.com. And with that said, Adi, do the giveaway. Remember, I feel like I'm doing this late. Remember, if you comment on this video, comment with your favorite cash play. You know what? Your favorite GBP play on this slate. Your favorite GBP play is going to be under owned. Comment in the description. You'll have a chance to win a free season pass from LocksDFS.com. Also, hit a like on this video if you're going to watch all the way through, and make sure you're a subscriber to win the free season pass. Adi has the free season pass from last week. Go, Adi.
Yep. All right. So last week, I see this guy commenting under all of our videos, but this is under Christian's video. We're going to go with Adil Walid. So Adil, go ahead and send us a DM at LocksDFS on Twitter, and we're going to hook you up with a free NFL season pass. We appreciate your support, man.
Ooh. Okay, we have a pretty good Thursday night game for once, which actually is pretty rare. Going to be one of the highest totals on the slate on the week of games. 25.5 for the Seahawks at home against the Rams at 24. Two pretty good, looking like they probably playoff teams in the NFC. It's definitely a change of pace from the usual, Thursday night slogfest. And obviously, this is still Thursday night, and the teams might be a little sloggy and a little bit gross. It's definitely possible, but the total definitely is not indicating that. So it's going to be a lot of fun, I think. And, Adi, where do you want to start? I mean, at the top, we have the two quarterbacks. And I guess that's really the number one question is, first of all, if you are playing one quarterback, I think the answer is pretty clear. What about you?
Yeah, it's Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
He's such a high floor, high upside play. We've seen him utilize his legs a bit more this season, with rushing attempts of 6 and 7 in weeks 2 and 3. Only 2 rushing attempts versus Arizona, but didn't really have to force anything in that game. So
he only threw it 28 times too.
Right, only threw it 28 times. But we've seen that upside versus New Orleans. This is definitely a game that has shootout potential. He's going up against a Rams defense that was on the field for an ungodly amount of snaps last week. They just got flamed by the Tampa Bay passing attack, and now Thursday going to Seattle. It's just I think that's why we're seeing so much line movement come in on Seattle. They've gone from +1 to -1.5, despite receiving only 47% of the bets. That's some pretty heavy line movement. It's not reverse line movement, but it's pretty heavy line movement. And I tend to agree with that. It's just a super tough spot for LA. I think that could lead to a sloppy game, but it could also lead to a shootout if this defense just hasn't had enough time to recover.
Yeah, I think I'd have Wilson in pretty much all of my lineups. Even if you're not going to captain him, I think I would definitely be trying to get him into any lineup. And what's kind of your take on Goff in this game? Obviously, he's a guy who has struggled so far in his career on the road, including this year. If you look at his home road splits, there's 2 games of each, 13.8 DraftKings points on the road, 23.9, and he's on a short week. Definitely seems like there's some merit to fading Goff here and going with maybe more of his receivers. Cooks has a great matchup, and we'll get to that. Yeah, I mean, what's your thought about fading Jared Goff?
I don't know. I think it's pretty optimal in these showdown slates to try and get the top weapons on each offense, and Goff is definitely included in that. But I think for the Rams situation, it's a little bit different because they do have like 3 wide receivers that are all viable plays each and every week. So you don't necessarily need to go to Goff. So I don't think he's a guy I'm going to be forcing necessarily. Usually I love to force in the 2 quarterbacks, but Goff's not a guy I'm going to be forcing. I am a little bit afraid of those home road splits. He hasn't historically performed that well against Pete Carroll's defenses. Again, it's a really tough place to play in Seattle on a short week. So we could see this Rams offense struggle a bit. And I'll try and get to Goff, but I'm not going to be prioritizing him like I usually am to both quarterbacks.
For sure. And I think he'll be very popular because we saw him have like a ceiling game last week against Tampa Bay where they were chasing, obviously pace up already for Bruce Arians when you're playing Bruce Arians, but then he's chasing the whole game because Tampa Bay, I mean, he threw, I'm pretty sure he threw a pick 6, if I remember right. He threw other 2 more picks that set him up in good field position. So, he just had the nut game. I think that could put a lot more people onto him. Like, for the prices being this close to each other, it's very obviously Wilson you're picking one. But that doesn't mean you have to completely fade Goff. But I do think that I think that Kupp and Cooks, and we can talk about the receivers now, I think, because if you are fading Goff, you're still – I mean, you probably don't want to be fading the entire Rams passing offense. You're gonna need to set yourself on a piece, at least one piece. So Kupp obviously, guy who's gonna be in the slot. Seattle has done well against Kupp so far in his career, notably. But that said, Kupp still has a ton of volume, just pretty consistently. The safest volume share on this offense. Might not have the highest upside in terms of air yards, which I'll pull them up right here. I think I don't have St. Louis up actually, or St. Louis, Jesus, Los Angeles up right now. But here, let me get these up real quick. But I mean, how do you feel about these Rams receivers? I'll let you kind of give me your takes on them and how you're kind of going to be utilizing them in cash and GVP.
Sure. So last week, I was all over Kupp and Robert Woods. We've seen that Tampa Bay team get shredded in the middle of the field, and those guys run the most routes out of the slot. But I mean, just a note on Cooper Kupp. I thought this tweet, Scott Barrett tweeted this out after Cooper Kupp's big Thursday night game. Was it Thursday night versus?
Oh yeah.
Whatever that primetime game was that he did really well in.
Browns, I think.
Right. Yeah, versus the Browns without their secondary up. But he tweeted out over Cooper Kupp's last 6 full games, he's averaged 23.4 fantasy points per game. Over his last 10 full games, it's 21.4. Over his last 16 full games, it's 19.3 fantasy points per game. And among all wide receivers last season, that would rank best, 3rd best, and 7th best. So Cooper Kupp is not being recognized. Maybe he will, starting week 5 and 6, but he's not being recognized as an elite wide receiver 1, which he is in this offense. So he's really matchup proof. He does have a relatively tough matchup versus Seattle, but this dude looks almost like, I don't know, 30-40% more explosive than he did prior to that ACL injury, which is just absurd. But he does. I mean, he showed it on the New Orleans catch where he rumbled like 66 yards and almost scored. He showed it on his run after catch touchdown versus Tampa Bay. He showed it versus Cleveland. He's just a really hard guy to fade in PPR. I mean, he's got monster target 10, 9, 12, and 15. It's going to come down. You're going to have to make a decision between a guy like Cooper Kupp and a guy like Jared Goff.
Pretty much.
And it's going to be right.
When you rattle those numbers off about his points per game, it makes you feel more comfortable about playing Kupp because you know that he's got a really, really solid floor pretty much across the board.
Right. And you saw in a game, obviously they were trailing and Jared Goff threw the ball 68 times. But in a game where it looked like Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks were getting all the attention, I think Cooper Kupp had 1 one catch in the first half. I played him last week, so I should know this. He had one catch in the first half, I believe.
Yeah.
1 or 2. And then he ended with, 30 fantasy points. So he's just sort of this matchup proof. Like, he's just always going to get there. He's always going to give you a real high floor as far as catch volume goes. So, yeah, I'm really going to try and prioritize him. Out of the other 2 guys, I think this is a week I'm a little bit more interested in Brandon Cooks than Robert Woods. The important note here is that Shaquille Griffin, he's a stationary cornerback for the Seahawks. He only plays on the left side. And Brandon Cooks runs the majority of his routes from the right side, whereas Robert Woods, when he's lined up outside, will typically run from the left side. So we could see Robert Woods draw Shaquille Griffin almost for the majority of this game. And on the other side, Trey Flowers has just been one of the worst cornerbacks this entire season. And Brandon Cooks is going to get him for a majority of the game. Brandon Cooks leads them in air yards. He's third in weighted opportunity rating out of the 3 of them, but Robert Woods really had a big spike week after last week. But Brandon Cooks, he's just behind Robert Woods. He leads him in air yards. He's got some regression coming his way.
Definitely has some regression coming his way. That's what I was going to say. Yep.
Right. So I could definitely see a guy like Brandon Cooks sort of breaking open this showdown slate and being a guy that you kind of have to have. So I'll go ahead and rank them Kupp, Cooks, and Woods.
Yeah.
Kupp and Cooks, then Woods for this slate. And I feel pretty confident in that ranking as well.
And then a huge part of choosing a huge part of all of pretty much your builds are going to come down to Kupp or Goff, because unless you're playing a cheap captain, you're going to be choosing between those 2. So, moving over to the Seattle pieces, pretty much Lockett is someone who is similar in composition, in terms of playing him on a showdown slate as a Tyler Boyd was on Monday night, where of course he didn't pan out. But he's a guy who he has a pretty solid matchup in the slot against the Rams, and which not great, but a decent matchup. And he's also a guy who we know that he has a pretty solid target volume as opposed to the rest of these Seahawks guys. Of course, in the red zone, there's going to be guys like DK Metcalf. There's going to be guys like Will Dissly. But between the 20s, Lockett has a great target share. And then obviously, like I just said, Metcalf, huge red zone target. Dissly, we saw last week. They're running routes for him just in he's looking. Russell Wilson snaps the ball. He's looking for Dissly in the end zone. That's happened a lot this year. So, kind of what's your take on the Seahawks wide receivers this week? I know I'm just going position by position on each team, but
no, you're good. Tyler Lockett, probably my favorite player on the slate. Guy I'm going to really, really try and jam into all my lineups. We saw what Chris Godwin did in the slot, which is typically a tough matchup versus Nicole Roby-Coleman. But we saw Chris Godwin put up 172 yards on 12 catches. 106 of those yards were on interior routes, which is huge for a guy like Tyler Lockett, who runs 73% of his routes out of the slot. He had a down game last week in a week that he was chalk. I think you're going to see people remember that and not really want to go back to him as far as the masses go. But I think the sharps will go right back to him. I think Christian brings up a good point about sort of a slight cause for concern with his red zone usage going to Dissly, who leads all tight ends in red zone targets, and DK Metcalf, who has 7 red zone targets of his own.
End zone targets.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, end zone targets. Yeah. End zone targets of his own. So I guess that does limit his sort of upside in the red zone, but this dude's still a threat to score from 40, 50 yards now. It's no problem. So I'm going to be trying to prioritize him just every week I'm going to pretty much in DFS. So love him. DK Metcalf, a guy I definitely think could bounce back this week. He popped on Josh Hermsmeyer's buy low models, which is always a nice little boost to a guy. He's gotten a steady stream of targets in his first 4 weeks, 6, 7, and 6, and then 4 versus Arizona, where they never really had to throw deep. They were just in cruise control in that whole game. So that's a game where he's not going to do too well. But he's just a guy on a showdown slate. A guy who has that much upside as far as they love to throw to him deep and they love to throw to him in the end zone. It's just a guy that you're kind of going to want some exposure to on showdown slates for sure. So I'll have him. And I love his price too. It's really fair, $6,400.
Yeah,
That's a super fair
I
thing.
like the price on him too. Um,
Yeah.
I I wanted to before we scroll down, and we will talk about the cheap Seattle receivers in just a second. Obviously, the
Mhm.
last two guys we had to talk about are pure Todd Gurley and Chris Carson. Todd Gurley saw a season high in snaps. He saw last and not just pure snap percentage of 75% last week, which was definitely optimistic. Of course, I think he only had like what? I mean, obviously game flow dictated this, but only had five carries, but he does see 11 targets. Um, so clearly they want to use him in passing situations. Um, and I'll let you talk about him in a second, but I wanted to also say Chris Carson. Not a great matchup against the Rams defensive line, running behind a not great offensive line. Um, and you've also got why am I forgetting his name off the top of my head? Rashad Penny coming back from injury this week, which a lot of people thought coming into last week would affect him. Obviously, Penny didn't play, but then Carson didn't fumble last week and ended up doing pretty well with his like 25, 26 touches. So obviously a great game script for him to have 22 carries, just like it was for Gurley to have 11 targets. So I mean, we said I feel like we have said this a lot on a lot of showdowns, but I think especially on these high priced ones, I find myself with a lot getting more exposure to receivers than I do running backs in high price high total games
Mhm.
because I expect it to be aired out a little bit more. Are you kind of the same? Were you gearing using Gurley and Carson less in cash, more most likely, and getting those guys just in GPPs?
Yeah, I definitely for Gurley. I mean, he just hasn't looked that good in any one of his games. He's had a couple good games. He had a great game last week
Yeah,
with 11
I thought
targets.
he looked explosive last week too. I will say that. I thought he looked good last week.
Right. He looked it was probably his best week, but
Right.
I still wouldn't go as he didn't look like 2018 Todd
Oh
Gurley
no, for
prior to
sure,
injury.
for sure.
So until we see that, I mean, it was nice that he set a season high in snap share. It was nice that he got a season high target share or targets, excuse me. Um, but just not a guy. I mean, it's just a very tough matchup on the road versus a good Seattle defense. It's the biggest key with him is that he did get 11 targets, and this Seattle team has allowed the third most fantasy points to, or excuse me, the third most catches to running backs. You saw that massive game that David Johnson had, 8 catches for 99 yards. It was a huge reason he was the Addie's action running back. Is just love his receiving role versus Seattle. And it's the same goes for Todd Gurley, and he could definitely get there if Seattle jumps out to a big lead and he does get the pass game work. But it's just a bit too risky for my liking. I'd rather, if I'm playing one of these guys, I'd rather go Chris Carson even with Rashad Penny back. Um, I think Chris Carson showed enough. I totally believe that. I don't know about you, but that coach speak that Pete Carroll had about we're going to show you how much we believe in Chris Carson. I totally bought that. Like that
Yeah.
seemed authentic as hell to me. So like, I believe it. And they gave him. I mean, they fed him 26 touches, 22 carries. He went over 100 yards, and he scored a touchdown that got called back by the Will Disley holding penalty. So he would have had an even bigger game without that. Definitely see this being a spot where Seattle jumps out to a fairly sizable lead and just sort of salts away the game and tries to keep this explosive Rams offense off the field using Chris Carson and Rashad Penny here and there. But I would definitely prefer Carson to Gurley in this spot.
Same. I agree with you, and I think that I was going to skip over these defenses as we scroll down here, but I do think that Seahawks defense would make sense in those Carson teams. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of banking on
Absolutely.
Goff throwing some picks, probably maybe a fumble, and then
Three picks. Three
yeah,
picks last week.
2 picks the week before. He's on the road.
Yeah.
Seahawks defense is like, especially their secondary, looks to be mostly on the up. So, yeah, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a spot where they could do pretty well. Um, Kickers more interested in Zurline, although he is the dog kicker. He also is a guy who can hit 55 yarders like just no problem with his eyes closed. Like probably the best kicker in the league. So definitely going to be going to Zurline if you are going one kicker. Both are in play, but Zurline definitely. Any thoughts on Gerald Everett? Obviously, we saw him with a pretty big game last week, and again, his volume was increased because of the game flow where they had to throw a lot and Goff threw like 60 something times. So you're not going to see this kind of 8 target game from Gerald Everett on a normal basis. You're going to be more around this 4 on a good day 5 range. Like that's really the upside, especially with Higbee healthy. So any interest in Everett?
I think he's a fine play. I mean, the Seattle defense is pretty good against the tight end. But I mean, he outstabbed Higbee. He had 50 snaps. Higbee had 39. Everett ran 42 routes. Higbee ran 25. So he definitely is the tight end one in this offense. But I mean, you got to make the decision between him and the kicker, and
Right.
I think I'd lean a guy like Zerline over a guy like Everett, but I think I'd probably play a guy like Everett over Jason Myers. With that being said, I think a team like Seattle is in this game, they're projected for a lot more red zone success than a team like the Rams are. If the Rams were to struggle, it's probably not going to be moving the ball from in between the 20s. It's probably going to come in the red zone. And in that situation, I would anticipate those drives stalling out more. And Zerline, I mean, they let Zerline kick 58-yard field goals if he wants. So, and he can hit them. So I think he's a weapon in his own right. So I'll definitely prefer him to probably the other two guys I talked about just now. But I think I'd lean Everett over Myers, just higher upside. I think Myers might be kicking a lot of extra points in this game.
There are 3 very cheap options below him. And I'm going to research these guys more in the morning before I put up the breakdown and kind of look into what I think their roles are going to be in this game. And I'm going to be honest, I don't have strong takes on any of them right now. Really, the only one I really know his role is Luke Wilson. And even that, I don't know if he will see a little bit of an expanded role this week. Luke Wilson, the backup tight end for Seattle, played like 25% of the snaps last week. He had like a few targets, 2 targets, 26 yards. 2 targets, 2 catches, 26 yards. He's $200 minimum. Always going to be interested in a minimum guy who's playing any role at all in the offense. I mean, to be honest. David Moore, a wide receiver for the Seahawks, played about 40% of the snaps last week. We've known Moore. He's played before last year. Really more of a deep threat type of player at 600. Still, again, a guy that's pretty much the man going to get snaps. So, and then above that, a little bit higher price is Doron Brown at 1,400. And this is why I need to research. I need to know what's the plan for them. Are they going to be running 12 personnel with Luke Wilson on the field a decent amount? Before they traded Vanette was playing around 40% of the snaps. Is Wilson going to be playing 40% of the snaps? Because if Wilson playing 40% of the snaps at $200, I'm like very interested in that.
I don't think he's going to hit 40%. I think they want to give Will Dissly like 80% of those snaps. Like that's a huge reason why they traded Nick Vanette.
Yeah.
And Will Dissly's done nothing but perform all season and prior to his injury last season. So I think we'll see Luke Wilson. I mean, he could pick up a couple targets for sure. He had a pretty sick catch last week as well. So, I mean, like he could definitely do his thing. He's familiar with his offense after playing for them last year. But I don't know how, if we see his role tick up, then maybe, but obviously we won't know that prior to this game. So it's kind of thin. I think I'd rather go with a guy like David Moore. We saw him play 40% of snaps, which isn't a ton, obviously, but considering that they were up double digits most of that game, is really not that bad. He is a deep threat, as always, so if he does get a catch, it has potential to just pay his salary off right there. If he has like in week 3, 1 catch, 29 yards, 3.9 points, 4 points, that's good enough for 600 right there.
Why I think Moore could be sharp chalk is just because like before his injury in preseason, he was pretty locked into the wide receiver 3 role. And he honestly, for a lot of people, was even the wide receiver 2 because no one knew the role that DK Metcalf was going to play on the offense. Mm-hmm. So like, it's really like he's still, I think a lot of, I don't know how many snaps he played the week before because I'm looking at his stats and he came back in week 3 from that. I think it was a shoulder injury. Shoulder injury. So like, if he is able to pass like Doron Brown in snaps, which totally seems possible to me. Like they cut Doron Brown preseason and re-signed him. Like, I think they definitely like more. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. Like $600 if he's gonna end up getting that wide receiver 3 role, and that's what I'm saying. I just need to read. I need to look at some reports. I need to read a little bit around, and that'll all be in the breakdown in the probably in the afternoon tomorrow. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense, and yeah, we'll talk more about it in the breakdown and in the Slack chat after. as we get closer to lock. But for now, he probably is my favorite sub, 1,400, sub 2,000 value play.
I would say sub kicker.
Sub kicker.
In terms of point per dollar, sub kicker, yeah.
Sure, yeah, I agree with that.
Cool. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up. I feel like we didn't talk too much about like full builds. Do you want to? We're not going to build anything like right here, but you just want to chat real quick about like my favorite captain is Russell Wilson, and I think I'm going to be trying to pair him with, like I said, I guess I already talked about. For me, I'm going to be trying to play more passing weapons in this game because I think this game is going to play towards the passing game because the total is high. So I guess that's pretty much the comment I'll leave. Like, and I also like Greg Zuerlein, and I would like to have him in my lineup because I think point per dollar wise, he makes a lot of sense here.
Sure, yeah, I agree.
Is kind of the same way for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, just like I sort of mentioned on last week's showdown videos, correlation is key to showdowns. Correlation is key to banking GPPs in showdowns, and it's also key to just cashing. I mean, you don't want 3 of your players in an elite game script and the other 3 not so much. So if you're making a team that has Russell Wilson and his pass catchers, you're hoping for a shootout. You're not so you might want to run it back with Rams pass catchers. Although if you make a team with Russell Wilson, Chris Carson, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and you're kind of going that Seattle onslaught, then you might just want to add the Seattle defense to that and get a sort of Pittsburgh Steelers, Cincinnati Bengals type of game.
Right.
So you just want to think about these correlations thing and be cognizant of, like, after you make your team, look at it and think, is this the game script that I anticipate this game having? And obviously it's not the end all be all. We see guys get there in negative game scripts, but it's just important to keep in mind.
For sure. And especially even I think especially in GPPs, like when you're building like, even if you're building like only 10 lineups, like just even when you're building that single lineup, think about, does my captain make sense with the rest of my team? And does, just the pieces correlate together? Like think about the possible game script. Think about if those players fit in the possible game script. We talk about this all the time, but yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. We'll wrap it up with that. Don't forget to claim your free season pass to the guy who we said at the beginning of the video, and be sure to leave a comment. Go ahead.
No, I just said Adele.
Okay. All right. I forgot his name. And leave a comment with your favorite GBP play for this slate. Someone who might be underowned, someone who you think isn't being talked about enough, someone who we maybe didn't talk about enough. Leave that comment, subscribe, hit us with a like. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys back here for the breakdown video and Adi's action. So see you guys then. Thank you guys so much. Peace.